Good evening, everyone. Today is the 31st of January, 2023, and this is a special meeting of the Willington Board of Education, which is a budget workshop meeting. So I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. We start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would all join me, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We start our meetings with time for citizens in town to be present and speak to the committee. We ask first that you identify yourself by name and address and proceed with your comments, which would be limited to 3 minutes each. You can let us know that you're on the screen to speak if you come on video and wave your hand, or use the reactions button on the bottom of your Zoom to raise your hand virtually so we can recognize you. I am not sure I see anyone who's here.
Just my admin team.
Well, we're welcome to everyone who's watching the recording after the fact to send us an email or come to a future meeting, because we love it when people come to meetings to talk to us. So moving on to the next item on the agenda then is the review of prior programs. This is our third budget meeting to discuss different aspects of the proposed budget. And tonight we're going to have program 8, which is operations and maintenance, and program 9, which is system-wide support. But if there's anything that we've covered so far, or there were questions that came up that you'd like to include now before we jump into new business, now would be the time for you to raise those questions. Go ahead, Donna.
I'm not sure if this is the right spot for this, but last meeting I had asked Phil for if he could put together a list of contracts that we could potentially prepay. And he did send a list out. So I don't know if we discuss that now or if we wait till the end. I just want to make sure that it gets covered.
That's something that we can discuss afterwards, because it might include some of the new sections of what we're talking about today. That is something that we talked briefly about at the end of the meeting last time. But one of the things we had also talked about was the use possibly of some of our reserved funds to offset some of these costs, as well in terms of looking at the overall budget. So I think that makes sense to hold till the end of this discussion, if that's okay with you.
That is perfectly okay with me, as long as it doesn't get forgotten.
Great. Well, okay, we all heard it, so we are all now tasked to trying to remember after the meeting before we adjourn. So, okay, so Phil, if you want to start on with program 8. I'm sorry, go ahead, Herb. I didn't see your hand.
Yeah, I just want to make a few comments. The Willington Board of Education budget seems to be focused on some of the goals that the superintendent presented in his packet, like student growth and success, school culture and climate, and sustainable investment in the school facilities and professional development. And the budget, as it stands now, superintendent has come in with a budget of $9,314,432, which is an increase of $239,792. And much of it is contractual, I understand. And his percentage increase overall from last year is under 3%. It's at 2.64, I think, something like that. And there have been a number of reductions in a few areas, textbooks, but there's been an increase in subscriptions, and the building maintenance is on a level and it's sustainable, but the consideration of the new building project that's going on, I think that we should make sure that we pump enough money into the building maintenance, at least to maintain center school, because if and when we build a new school, we don't want to turn over a building that is incapable of being used. In other words, we should maintain it. And also special education purchase services have increased. Now, I think the administration and the superintendent have put together a pretty good budget, which has, as I mentioned before, a 3% increase. But I wish there had been more of a chance to go through it with a fine tooth comb. I know we're going to be discussing it at length as we go along. We haven't quite finished with all of the items yet. But there are really two budgets. The budgets that we're getting, I mean, they're simply line items. We don't have any idea of what is in that line item. I'm sure the administration and the superintendent have another budget somewhere, and they've listed all of the items in, you know, and I don't mean to micromanage, but we don't have that information. We just have a blanket figure, and we have no knowledge of what is really in the budget under those listings. But I do believe that the budget is responsible, however, and reasonable in light of the high inflation rate in the environment that we're in. And I think it's very impressive. And I think the budget as it stands, not including the two that we're going to discuss later, but I think it'll probably maintain the quality of education for the students in Willington. So the budget as it stands now, there are some weaknesses in it, but I think what we are presenting and will present to the town will be sustainable. I think our weaknesses in the budget, I know the CIP is not in the budget, but it's a separate item. But CIP is very weak as far as maintaining any of the buildings or anything like that, unless you look 2 or 3 years out into the future. And also, we used to have enrichment programs, and if I'm not mistaken, some of them have been deleted or put aside or phased out or whatever. And I'm disappointed that we don't have that in there. And also,
Herb, just a point of clarification.
Let me finish.
I just want you to repeat what you said about what types of programs. You moved aside a little in the video, not the video, the sound got quiet, and I don't want to miss that point. You were just saying about the types of programs that you wish there were more of, or you wish?
Yeah, we used to have enrichment programs.
Enrichment programs, thank you. It was that word that got cut out, and I wanted to make sure. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please continue.
I have to think of where I am now.
Sorry, sorry.
Oh, here we are. Yeah, we cut back on books. That's one thing I never could understand. We used to have a lot of books, and kids were using them. And now I don't know what they're using, whether they have printed pages or how they're reading. I don't know if they read a complete book or whether it's just extras like a history book or English book or whatever. And that budget has been decimated early, that part of the budget. And also, now think about it, where books are involved. I mentioned this previously, the library, for example, has not received I shouldn't say this strongly, but has not really received the support that I would like to see. The library used to be the center of a lot of programs and a lot of the learning that took place. And I'm sure it still is to some extent, but we're not supporting, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, the libraries in Center School and Hall School. And the leveling of purchase of books, for example, materials, is an instance of that. But overall, I think the budget has embedded in it a lot of hard choices on the part of the administration and the superintendent. But the budget itself effectively maintains the excellent education system that the Willington Board of Education has built over a number of decades. I think that's very significant and important. And I think that in back of what the administration and the board and the superintendent are doing is projecting a budget that is sustaining a suitable education for the children in Willington with the money that we have available. But we do have some weak spots in it. I thought I just pointed out a few of them. I don't want to go.
Thank you for that, Herb. When we get through the two program areas for tonight, there will be time for us to specifically ask for certain areas to be changed. You know, we can have information to fill to present back to us a final version. So either money we want to add or subtract that we can come together. We're not voting on a final budget tonight, but we don't want to make Phil do all of those calculations on the fly next time. So if we have some agreement around some of those items tonight, that would make it a lot easier at our regular meeting when we are doing that. So if there's specific areas, Herb, especially after we talk about maintenance, that you want to see increased or whatnot, please, make a motion at the end of the meeting to include some of that, and we can have further discussion about some specifics. Okay.
Well, I think the budget that the superintendent is presenting will probably maintain what we've had in the past couple of years anyway.
Okay. After we've had the presentation, anybody who feels that they want to, make changes, that will be the time for us to have this discussion. Brianna, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, can I just say something about the books?
Yeah.
That's been on my mind, Herb, since you made that observation when we looked at that particular part of the budget, that purchasing books for the library is something that seems to be on your mind. And believe me, I love the smell of a new book, or when it crackles open with that special wrapping on it from a library. Actually, that was my first job at the Mary G. Edwards Library. So that place is near and dear for sure. So I've been thinking about that and wondering why a decrease in book purchases for our library may be. And the top two reasons I can come up with is, one, our classroom teachers have really wonderful libraries in their classrooms. And because children are able to have more choice in their learning, they are choosing books from sets or the teacher's personal collections that are there in the classroom. So they don't always have to go to the library to take their books. I've seen language arts classrooms there at Hall that have a wide variety of genres and levels. So I think that's part of it, is maybe through the language arts curriculum line, maybe something like that. That's where some of the literature is available to the children. And then, I love the smell of a new book, like I said, but digital libraries are also something that students are getting their hands on. I have kindergartners using Epic, which is a online program, and they can listen to stories read to them. They can read to them themselves. So I think new technology is kind of taking the place of some of those things also.
Go ahead, Herb.
Yeah, Brianna, I can appreciate what you're saying, and I understand that that most teachers, professional teachers, accumulate books and do what is necessary in their classroom to provide, the best education they can. But the library, and I'm not a librarian, but I've been in a few libraries here and there. But in the schools, it seems to me that the libraries, they have a lot of research books. They have all kinds of textbooks, materials. And if a whole class goes in, for example, and we don't have a licensed librarian anymore as a paraprofessional or whatever. But if you have a licensed staff member in there, they're in a position to give a lecture or direct students to books that they're looking for in research programs and things like that. We don't have that at center or hall school. And I think it's a missing ingredient in an excellent system. I mean, we don't have that. We have X number of dollars and money, and we have to, go along with it. But to me, the library has always been kind of a center of learning in a building and for the youngsters in the building. And
Yeah,
I don't feel that we have that now. We have, we provide a library, we provide paraprofessionals, which is all great. We don't have the moving toward the excellent services that we should be doing.
okay. I think digital citizenship is taught by, right. Yeah. I hate to say it. A lot of that research gets done online, and the students are learned to look for sources that are valid and how to determine whether sources are credible or not. And the teachers are working on that kind of digital citizenship and how to decide what's true and what is not along the way. So that might be the 2023 equivalent a little bit.
I saw Anne's hand was up too. Go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, Herb, if I'm not mistaken, we have a person who is a certified librarian who oversees both of the libraries, and the assistants are there full-time, I believe, in each. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but off goes my screen.
Yeah, and go ahead and turn your screen off.
So there, I know for a fact at Hall there's an assistant, correct? And I'm not sure about Center, but there is a certified librarian who oversees the libraries and does some teaching also, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. And Donna has her hand up too, if you want to come off mute, Donna.
Yeah. This is kind of tying into what Herb and Brianna have said. I know I'm a person who cannot read everything on a screen and absorb it, which is why things get printed out for me so that I can read them and process them and think about them. So do we have enough printed resources so that the students that think like I think can do well? Because if I had to do everything just on the screen, I would not do as well as having a printed material. And then I'm sure there are those students that do better on the screen, or there's no difference. So I just want to make sure that we have enough of the right resources for the students so that they're ready for success.
Yeah, and this is about balance, right? So I think that's what we're saying here, is that there is some online reading that happens for sure, whether it's an iPad or a Chromebook, but there's a significant amount of books too. And I just made myself a note, Herb, just to take some pictures, just to give you a sense of what we do have. And I'm just going to question if my wife bribed you or anything to say these things, because she will be the one that will always say, give me another 10,000 for books and I'll spend every last dime of it. So we do try and find that balance. And what I'll do is try and get a sense of what we have purchased over the last couple of years for both the library and as part of some of our curriculum work, and try and get some pictures just to show you what's there. And I can assure you that every year that we have money at the end of the year, my administrators know this, that we kind of keep a list, like what do we need that is, on our list that, is might be hard to budget for, or just to extend the budget. And so that's one of the items that is always on there, is those books. So we can easily extend that, but I would love to give you a sense first of what that looks like.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Erin, go ahead. She's muted. You have to do something. There we go.
I looked back into our more granular notes that went into specific as we created the budget, and allotted in the supplies, we have around $7,400 allotted for reading, for books, for next year, to purchase textbooks for classroom libraries, mentor texts, decodables for K1. So there's around about $7,500 in next year's budget. And that's this year, we're looking at around the same amount that we are purchasing and bringing in new decodables and different books, just to give you an idea of because I know it is lumped into a bigger line, as you mentioned, Herb, I want to just get that out for you because I looked back in our notes.
It's only that it does not include the library books for the library.
Correct. Those are
you're
those
only
are
talking about is curriculum-based language arts, books that are connected to our curriculum for classroom use, not the libraries.
Yeah.
Donna?
Just as a follow-up, Phil, I think you had said previously that the library does get some books when they have those scholastic book sales and things like that. Correct. Do you have any idea how much, either number of books or dollar value of books that we're getting through that? Because that could help, if we're getting $3,000 of books through that, then it kind of gives us an idea that, okay, we're on track or we're not on track with what we should.
Yeah, honestly, and I hate this answer, but it depends. So in the book fair at Center School, she might get between $3,000 and $5,000. And some of those book fair books are, $295, $395 a book, that are soft cover, smaller books. You might get a hardcover book that starts getting into the $12.95, $14.95, level. It's just it depends on what it is. Typically the elementary, and she has, those are, what's on the shelves in what we order. Typically when they go into classrooms, they're usually soft cover. When they go into the library, they're usually typically hardcover. And so that's a little bit more expensive. But obviously they last a little bit longer. But I don't have a sense of, what she's getting, a number of books. I can try and get some of that information just to give you some more ideas about that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's move on from these discussions about the previous budget, knowing that we will have time to discuss at the end. If there's anything in particular that you want to try and add in or subtract out or have additional discussion about lines, we can do that at the end after we've had the presentation of these last two sections. So Phil, I'll manage if anybody comes or goes out of the waiting room if you want to share your screen.
Perfect. So the first program tonight is program 8, operations and maintenance. This is the program that has the custodial maintenance services for both center and hall schools. You can see that one of the secretaries, and this individual happens to be at hall school, 0.15 of his salary is tied directly to maintenance. So he does all the, when we do purchase items, he's the one putting in those requisitions. That's part of his position. We do have one maintenance custodian at center and one maintenance custodian hall. And then you can see that at night at hall school, we have 2 custodians, and at center school, we have 1. So one custodian for about 30,000 square feet is about what we go off of. You can see the contractual salaries that are there. And again, this is just a portion of that individual. That's that 0.15 there. That's a portion of it. You can see that again, the contractual salaries for custodians and maintenance custodians is in there. And then we have a line there for summer and substitutes. So that's when we bring people in to do our summer cleaning. They're part-time workers. They come in, sometimes they only work 10 hours. I let the maintenance custodians build that, meaning that I give them a cap on the number of hours within the budget to do what they need to do. And typically they're slightly under it, depending on some of the projects that they have to do. So we've kept that flat because that number has worked for us. You can see that there's about a $10,000 increase in the Kerma line. That's property insurance. What I'll tell you is that's not only property insurance, but we have an increase there that is specifically for cybersecurity insurance. We believe that we're closing in on what we need to have in place to be eligible for it. And that's, again, in collaboration with the town. So they have an increase there as well. And that's what we were told to put in. We were told by Novus the kind of going rates that people are paying based upon their size. And so we put the increase in there. So when we do get that quote, and information in that we can afford it. The custodial supplies we did increase, and you were just talking about inflation a moment ago. There's a 10% increase in custodial supplies here, and simply because that's what we're seeing between chemicals and paper towels and things like that. That's what we're seeing in this supply line. They do get when they travel to Mansfield Supply or any of the stores where they need to pick up parts that are nearby, they get the IRS reimbursement, and that's what that dollar amount is there. So really the increase in this line is we're talking about contractual increases for salaries and really the cyber insurance, and it's just part of what they have it in as maintenance and operations, because part of our operations is maintaining our cybersecurity. And so this is where Donna really wanted to make sure we put that in, because it's part of the KERMA bill. Questions about 8? It's a pretty straightforward one.
Go ahead, Donna.
So if a faucet needs to be replaced or minor repair kind of thing, where is that budgeted?
So it can come out of, we kind of use these this pocket of money that's in this program 8 for more of district-wide stuff, but sometimes there are certain items that we'll order a lot of. So when they're waxing floors, they'll do one big bulk order that they distribute between the two. But then they also have in their programs, and sorry for making you dizzy, this section here is typically just their the building maintenance. This is just those kind of contractual things like the fire extinguishers. So when they have something that comes up that they have to fix, such as a faucet, it typically comes out of this specific program, and it's broken between the two. Sometimes it's a matter of center school needs a little bit more than a hall, or vice versa, and it's how we use this line.
So the custodian supplies is supplies and small repair items?
Correct. Yeah, so and a silly example, it just happened this morning. Steve Felino flagged me down this morning as I was walking through hall, and he said, hey, my salt spreader is rusted out and dead. I need a new one. Just gave him a verbal, find something, put in the PO, and it'll come out of this amount of money so he can salt the sidewalks when it gets icy. Things like that. That's not necessarily a fix it, but it's an example of a supply.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Ann?
Phil, where is MCOR in the budget?
It is we break it into their programs here.
Okay.
Hold on, give me 1 second. Sorry, it's right here. So okay. When we put it, we break it into their specific, what their cost is.
Okay.
And so there's a portion in hall and a portion in center.
Oh, so by school, it's broken down. Correct. By school. Okay, very Correct. Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no additional hands, let's move on to the next section of the budget.
Okay, so program 9 is system-wide support. This has got a variety of items that you really need to operate a school district. Has technology, services, magnet school tuition, legal fees, school security. You've got a bunch of different items in here. You see I'm in here in this program, as well as my assistant, Brenda. The other portion, she's obviously full-time. The other portion is someplace else. It's in transportation. And so when you go through this, you can see the combination of our salaries there, and you get into purchase services. And this is the variety. So when students go out, you can see that we're expecting a significant decrease next year in magnet school tuition. We actually had several folks return after going out. They said, nope, what you're doing is better. Thank you. We're coming back. And so that's what we're expecting for next year is $29,000. Typically those are about, between 4,000 and 6,000. And this is not including if there's any special education costs, different program. This is just that tuition. The teacher retirement is typically every other year. We do not need to budget any money for it next year, which is nice. We've kept legal fees flat. And that's typically between, special education, could be residency issues, just consultation items. It's a reasonable number that's in there. I've been told our legal fees are significantly lower than most districts. My office has a copier that we own, and we're going to make it run as long as we can. So we have some minor lease maintenance fee in here. You can see all of the subscriptions and services now are in this really next section. So you've got Microsoft licenses for the teachers. You've got all of our security certificates, our firewall. This is the Board of Ed's portion of Novus. That 110, I think we pay 47%, and the town pays 53%. So that's there. The cybersecurity monitoring service is something new that you paid a big portion of that last year to set this up for cyber insurance. That will be the ongoing monitoring services that we need to be able to be eligible for cyber insurance. You've got School Messenger, which is our notification system to send out messages to the school community, and they also do the website. We have our Power School program, which is our school operating system. That's our information system where we store all of our student information, addresses, grades, things like that. We've got some district-wide academic subscriptions. If it was one school only, we put it in the school. If it was district-wide, we put it in this program. So Newsela is tied, or Newsela, however you want to say it, it's tied to the reading curriculum, and Read Naturally is also an intervention program. We have our Raptor program. This is to get it going, and now our regular just annual subscription is that new number. You can see our phone services in there, our internet services in there, and that's expected to be flat. Same thing with postage. You've got the Board of Ed clerk to do your minutes. We took out the teach English language learners because that money's not being spent, and we do have a grant that can fund that, and we can make adjustments out of another grant if we need to, or out of the budget. It's been minimal and not been used, so I took it out. We have some 504 items here, and again, 504 is it's that part of the Rehabilitation Act. And so it's minimal. We haven't used those funds over the last couple of years as much. So we looked at our past and we dropped those down to 700 and 500. We dropped down the mandatory training for staff because this we're doing in-house. We have someone who's trained, so it's significantly cheaper. We're trying to do more of that. We're also, and just along the same lines, we're trying to train someone on our math program, IM. If we can train our math coach in that program, that individual will be able to provide all of the professional development versus spending $2,000 a day for some of these places to come in and provide PD for one day. The public safety officers are for, our bigger shows, our promotion ceremony. E-rate consulting is what they come through to help us with our E-rate subscriptions. We get significant savings on our internet, some of our purchases for equipment, our Wi-Fi, things like that. We pay an E-rate consulting fee for that. And then typical stuff here. Supplies for the Board of Ed is minimal, it's flat. My office here is $1,000. And then your dues. We looked at the dues increased a little bit here for the various agencies, which is kind of happening across the board. And you can see those first three is there. We kept your conference for Board of Education flat, but typically, we manage if we go over that. My conference money is contractual. My travel is also contractual. So you can see minimal change here. It's, $700-ish. But this is a really important program. I'll tell you that this, when I came in as superintendent, was probably the most annoying program, I'll say, because of so many subscriptions. And Brenda and I, and we're working with Novus, have a really good grasp on this program now, and the number of subscriptions and what we have to renew every year. Now we've eliminated items, and some of them just by doing something different. And so this is a very spot on. We made that list very particularly because it was easier for you to get a sense of what is in this program instead of just saying subscriptions.
And we appreciate that, Phil, because this is the one that was the most confusing previously.
Yeah.
The fact that you've laid it all out is helpful. Okay, questions on this section? Go ahead, Herb, and then Donna.
Phil, in the legal fees, we're putting up $10,000 for the last 2 years and $10,000 this year. Is that a fee we pay in advance, or is that every time we use it, they charge us according to the hours that are utilized? So
Correct.
it's not a flat rate. So we could spend 10,000, or we could spend nothing, right?
Correct. And we try and solve some of these issues. You know, there's a specific law book we use. If we need input, though, we will call the attorney, and it's charged as we go. So, you know, we don't give the money in and not get the hours for it. You know, if there is a retainer that we maintain, but she just draws off that retainer, and this is what replaces that retainer for us. You have one bad lawsuit, this is a drop in the bucket. And to be honest with you, our attorney, and I would say probably Marcia and I are the two that really use this the most. I'm not really sure the principals use this too often. Maybe in a very specific situation, I'll say, please give the attorney a call. But her fee is significantly less than some of the larger firms. And so, you know, that money typically goes a long way for us. Some of these firms are $400, $500, $600 an hour. It's a lot.
So we don't have a retainer. So if we don't have any issues at all, we wouldn't use any of that money, and we're not paying anything for our attorney.
Correct. We'll encumber the 10,000, and whatever doesn't get used, sometimes we'll put it into a retainer, and sometimes some of it will come back. I don't recall what we did last year off the top of my head, but that $10,000, you know, when we have negotiations and you know, we're consulting on negotiations, she's doing that prep work for us. That's what those, you know, funds are for.
And also on the magnet school tuition, is that something you call the school or find out how much the tuition is going to be? So that's a fixed figure.
Correct. Yeah. And they're a lot of that is driven by the state. Some of them are capped. Sometimes they're free. There's a couple that they can go to in Hartford that we don't get billed for, and we're always happy when they go there. But there's a couple that are between $4,000 and $6,000 typically. And so we just get the bill for that for the year. If the student returns, you know, in January, we'll say we get a credit back for the months that they did not attend.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Donna?
Bill, I know you explained this some, but what does E-rate stand for? Or what? Because it's E-rate consulting, I'm not really clear what it is.
So E-rate is a very regulated governmental reimbursement program, and every couple of years you're eligible. You know, if your town is eligible, you have to complete an extensive amount of paperwork. Our public library is E-rate eligible as well. Years ago, probably, well, I'm going to say maybe even 10 years ago at this point, Brenda, my assistant Brenda, was trained. She went down to Washington, D.C. to go through it. And this is one of those governmental programs that's constantly evolving. And it is significantly easier for us to, we counted up our hours. The first year we did this without a consultant. And it was ridiculous, the amount of time we spent on it to get the return. So we found a consultant that does this work. This is all they do. And they actually work with us and Novus. And so we got a percentage off. So I'll give you an example. I think we had about $80,000 a couple of years ago for equipment. And it actually covered a bunch of our Wi-Fi drops, our access points. And so instead of it costing us, $150,000, it cost us $80,000. And so it's kind of like a grant system where you get a certain amount of money by your district and you don't get it every year. But the application process is very, very, very lengthy. I'm not sure if you know anything about this, Michelle, or if you have to deal with E-rate, but it's a headache.
I've heard that from other districts.
Yeah.
So it's basically they help fill out the paperwork that gets submitted so we can get money back on things that we have to do anyway.
Correct. And
Okay.
any reports that we're required to fill out, that, you know, every 6 months or every year, you have to fill out this 1064-B and you got to get it in. And that's, you know, all that evaluation process. They manage all of that for us. They tell us what they'll do our bids for us. So because there's a very strict bidding process for this, they'll do all of that.
Okay, thank you.
And typically, if you get it wrong, there's not any flexibility to go back and fix it.
Correct.
So it's useful for that. Herb, I see your hand.
Yes, in regard to security, Phil, I know that it's kind of confidential and the public, you know, doesn't know everything that we're doing, and the board is in the same position. You know, we allocate money for security, and we know we have some security. We know we have cameras around and things of that kind, but
Absolutely.
I noticed that in the school security gateway, there's been a reduction. Maybe I missed it in your opening remarks, but are you confident that our security, prison security, is adequate or more than adequate?
Yes. So any of the repairs that we've had has come out of our maintenance budget. Things like if a door buzzer doesn't work or a strike or something like that, it'll be fixed there. This the Raptor, the school security gateway, is just the screener. So if you were to come into the office as a visitor now, you turn over your license, they scan to make sure we know who we're letting into the building. If there's any red flags about you, it goes basically through an FBI database. You know, make sure you're not a child offender, things like that. And that's what that annual subscription has, the cost is now for us. But last year we put in a significant number of cameras in both buildings. And those are things that we purchased with end of the year funds that, you know, again, when there's insurance savings, we always have a list of things that we need. Some of them are nice to have. Those are important to have. And I'll tell you, we use our cameras quite often now, for all sorts of things, you know, and to know what's going on. But yes, we're in decent shape without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're in very good shape.
Now you're connected, aren't you, to the security system?
I am. Yes, I am.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Other questions? Okay. So seeing none, we will move on to the next section, which is program adjustments. This is the section I had mentioned earlier, where if there's anything that you would like changed or adjusted in advance of our voting on this at our next full meeting, that's the time. This is the time for us to discuss that and let Phil do his calculations so he's not trying to do all of this on the fly during the meeting next time.
Can I start, Michelle? Is that okay?
Do.
So I had a conversation with the business manager and looking at from the email that I sent you about the consideration for prepays. And one of the things we talked about is the number of prepays. You have to make sure you have them tracked. And part of our discussion was what is a safe amount to reasonably apply of your non-lapsing fund if you wanted to, without putting yourself in jeopardy. If you asked for say you had money at the end of this year and you asked to replenish it, if the answer was no from the Board of Finance, what amount would you want in your account to make sure that you could cover a student coming in for an outplacement, and without absolutely putting a burden on your budget? And so through our conversations, Donna and I both felt that confident that you would want to leave at least $100,000 in that account. You have $250 in there as of now. And what you could do, and this is kind of an alternative to what I emailed you, is that you could basically say, just cap it out at the 150. Instead of prepaying those other items, you could basically apply $150,000 of the non-lapsing funds towards your 23-24 budget. It would be applied towards special education outplacement that we currently have. If you did that, you would be just under 1%, with no other reductions, no other prepays. If you applied 150,000, you would be at a 0.99. So I just figured I'd share that so you knew kind of what the cap was. It doesn't mean you have to do the cap if you want, but before someone made a recommendation or some thoughts, I figured that was important to share with you, the kind of ceiling.
Thank you, Phil. I appreciate it. That's really helpful information. I do want to go on the record for saying that I definitely am not generally in favor of prepays line by line, in part because it starts to blur the line between what's the budget for this year and what's the budget for next year. And I think that it's the more that we can stick with what budget we have, what we don't use, we give back or put in the non-lapsing fund. And then next year we spend what we think we need to do the budget. It's important for the town to understand what we are spending our money on. And I think if we start doing oh, we have some for this year, some for next year, and we start to make it any more complicated. So the thing I like about that, Phil, is that's simple and elegant, which is rare. So I appreciate that. Donna, go ahead.
The other question I have is, I agree it would be a good idea to assign a large hunk of what we've already put away against this year's budget. I kind of think of it as, if your kid is constantly you think your kid needs $50 a week, and you're scrimping and saving and making sacrifices to give your kid $50 a week, and then all of a sudden they have this huge bank account, and you've been scrimping and saving, it just feels like it's, even if it's not intentional, that people are making sacrifices to support the town, not just the Board of Ed, but the town as a whole. So I like the 150, and I agree that putting against special ed would make sense, because that area is big enough to absorb it all. And in reality, one of the concerns we've had is, I wouldn't want to bring down the non-lapsing fund to nothing, because that gives us a buffer should there be an outplacement. But the other thing I was wondering about is this year's budget. When we look at the 22-23 numbers, if it looks like we're going to have a big hunk of money left over, I'm not saying that we should use all of that to offset this year's budget, but if there's, if you tell me what number it is today that we haven't encumbered, that looks like might be overage, maybe a portion of that we should apply to next year, knowing that we haven't touched that $100,000 in the non-lapsing too. So do you know what that number is?
So the question, Donna, that I just wanted to clarify, because I think we're getting a little bit of confusion about, if we used money from the non-lapsing fund, it wouldn't go against the 22-23 budget. It would be applied on this budget that we're discussing now for next year, and would therefore then bring down that amount by $150,000. If there was money left at the end of this year, we could then vote to ask the Board of Finance to approve anything that's left over to replenish the non-lapsing fund.
And what I'm saying,
that's an option,
is use the non-lapsing fund for the 23-24 budget. But also, is there anything in the 22-23 budget that we've underspent significantly and you don't think it's going to be, like sometimes you have these savings because something's changed from what we budgeted to what the contract turned out to be. So and I'm making this up because I don't remember, like say we budgeted a 10% increase in insurance because that's the best information we had at the time, but it came in at a 5%. So even though we budgeted 10%, for a 10% increase, it was only a 5% increase. On that budget line item, you're not going to spend the rest of that money because you got new facts after the fact. And in that case, could we take that 5% difference and prepay something else so that we're reducing the budget even further for next year, understanding it's a one-time thing?
So Donna, you're correct. There's typically usually some different amounts of money that we know ahead of time would be available either in a particular line item or not. But I'm curious if you can tell me why, what would the goal be? Is the goal to reduce it below the 1% increase amount? Or are you trying to get this significantly lower than that? Is that a problem that you're trying to reduce it as much as possible? It's all the town's money and it goes back to the town.
Right. But what happens is when we ask for a certain amount of money, and I think the town has approved our budgets, at least in the past few years. I don't remember a budget being defeated, but I can't say for sure. But I know that the other departments I've been told they're all being hit really hard, and there's going to be a potentially huge increase to the town, having nothing to do with the potential new school building. This is a separate from that. So I'm saying, since it's all the town's money anyway, if we can reduce our ask, because the other departments, it sounds like they're going to be painful asks, that it'll be, easier on the townspeople. And that's why I'm suggesting it. I wouldn't want to pull something out of, if there's an account that it's iffy, we might need the rest of that money on that budget line item. I wouldn't suggest that. I'm just looking for more of the things where Phil can look at it and say, I'm 100% sure or 98% sure that there's going to be a lot of money left over. And he needs to look at the total for the whole budget, because I know sometimes we move things between lines. So if something's over, something's under, it nets, we're okay. But I didn't know, when he looks at the most recent reports, if there was something like that available so that we could do our best to keep it low.
And I think he's doing some calculations while we're talking. The one difficulty I have about prepayments, and this is not new, I've said this year after year, is that it's really doesn't become a one-time payment. What it looks like then is that, oh, that line item is significantly lower. And then why is it higher this year? Well, because we prepaid the year before. And well, do we have to prepay again next year? Becomes a bad cycle. It's like a bad habit in terms of financial best practices to do that. I know for my organization, I try as much as possible to never do that and to keep the lines as clean as possible. I do recognize what you're saying about giving the money back to the town would allow for example, the Board of Finance and the CIP committees possibly to make some easier decisions around the overall budgeting for this year. But yeah, it's not a one-time issue though. Once you start to go down that road, then next year the numbers look lower than they actually are. It warps the annual budget process in my mind. That's why I'm opposed to it.
What I would say is, instead of, and I'm just going to make this up so that we have something to talk about specifically. Like if we went to the program 9 with the town-wide support, if we decided that we had $50,000 left over from this year in program support because of something or other. I just put it at the bottom, just like he does the grant, so that we can see that we don't actually change the line items, but put it at the bottom, just like you would put a grant as a reduction, so that next year when we're looking at the items, it doesn't look like our Novus was 50,000 instead of 100,000. So I agree, it's not fair to, it could be misleading to change a specific line item. I'm just thinking about putting it at the bottom as a reduction, just like we're going to put at the bottom anytime we apply non-lapsing funds for that.
Laura, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just, my understanding was if we had funds that we didn't spend for those changes, whatever, then it reverts back to the town and we're allowed to put a certain percentage in the non-lapsing fund. So it seems like any of that type of money we would have to put into the non-lapsing fund, then we could possibly use it for something. But wouldn't all of that end up having to be at the end of this year after this budget is passed?
So you're right that there is the way to do that would be to not actually apply it to this budget, showing it as a line. It would be that, I don't know, for example, we were talking earlier about library books. If we spent the full amount on all of the library books for next year, everything they want to spend, you buy all the library books now. Doesn't work that way because of printing deadlines, right? You would want to buy recent books, but say you spent your $7,000 on your library books now, then you would zero out that line so that it shows zero money for library books next year. So you can't really apply it in the same way because it's not money we have, it's money that's in the town. So you're right, Laura, there is a process by which we could do that. We do have to recognize that while we can put money in the non-lapsing account, there is a role for the Board of Finance in that process too.
Can I clarify something? Because I think this is really important, and this is the risk in prepaying, is that, and it's honestly, it's the risk is there with non-lapsing too, because your budget is going to come down 100. If you put $150,000 in non-lapsing, your budget is going to be still the same amount next year. So I'll give you the bus example. If you're going to, prepay a month of your bus contract, because that's something the auditors would see is an extended year contract, that you could do that. That's about $47,000 that you could prepay. So you take $47,000 out of that account, out of that line. The problem is the following year, it's now 47 plus 47. That's going to go into that. So it's now looking like it's almost $100,000 increase, and you are already increasing the budget 1% without even touching any of the salaries or anything like that. That's the way you have to look at it, and there's a risk to it. And the risk, some years you get lucky. This is one of those years. I'm going to be honest with you. And I understand this is the frustration, I think, from you, Donna, is that we know we have money in health insurance right now in the 22-23 budget, and it's because we got lucky. We hired 5 or 6 new people, and they all waived insurance. And when you go from family insurance and you're budgeting $28,000 per person on the Board of Ed payment side, and those 5 people waive, that's $150,000 in savings that you have in your budget now. And so that, we don't know if it's going to happen every year. Some years you get lucky, but what we're budgeting for next year, we might have 3 people now take insurance, and now you might be in the whole $90,000. And that's, again, where your non-lapsing can cover. So it's a little, you have to be cautious about it. Whereas the grants, every year those grants come in, they might get a little bit slower. We know we can kind of rely on them. But I don't know that you can always rely on your non-lapsing fund.
Can I make a recommendation that might help to meet Donna's goal of possibly offsetting some of the stress of other increases outside of the education part of the town's budget? And that would be that we move ahead with planning to do adding the $150,000 from the non-lapsing fund to offset the cost for this budget. And that, Phil, we ask you to communicate with the Board of Finance as they're about to make their decisions about the amount of money that you think may be coming back to the town. You know, if let's off the top of our head, say it's $500,000. If it were $500,000, you can say, and we're going to ask you to put 150,000 of that back in our non-lapsing fund possibly, but that still leaves 350,000 that we wanted you to know will be back in your coffers in case you want to make some different decisions. So that might, Donna, help to offset the concern that there might be painful cuts that might not be necessary if they knew that money was coming.
That seems reasonable.
Okay.
Well, Phil, isn't there some kind of state law where you cannot bring a budget in for less than the previous year?
Yeah, MBR is still there, but we're still above our budget from last year.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we should be really excited about the fact that we could present a budget that comes in at under 1% increase, given the rate of inflation, given contractual requirements, given the cost of gas and heating oil, et cetera, and bus contracts. I think that we should be, clicking our heels and jumping for joy at a budget that's good. So
I'll tell you that I have access to through my CAPS group. We are the lowest on the screen for superintendent's proposed budgets, and we are the absolute lowest. So
yeah. Herb, did I see your hand? Yeah, go ahead, Herb, and then Donna.
Yeah, just a brief comment in regard to the library. On the agenda, so I don't have any adjustment that I want to make at the present time, because I understand the superintendent is going to do some research, and at the next meeting he will be bringing additional information in on what we're doing now and where the money is going and things of that kind. So I'll hold off on that. My other question is, Phil, do you think we have enough money to maintain the buildings? I mean,
yes, I mean there's.
It looks like we have enough money to fix the boiler, do odd jobs like that, but to maintain when I say maintain the building, I mean the roof, the exterior, the rooms. In other words, are we going to pass that expenditure on to the town side if and when we get the K8 new building completed?
So between the individual school budgets and that program 8, I do believe we have enough, and CIP. You have your preventative maintenance program that's in place through MCOR. So right. When they come through, and I'll give you an example this year, they came through, and when they do their annual checks on our air handling units and on the boilers, they find something that's not working or is broken. They just send me a quote for it and tell me what it is, and it gets fixed. So the maintenance, those preventative maintenance things are going along. This budget doesn't cover things like paying for a brand new boiler. If we needed some, inexpensive patching on the roof, this budget would cover that. We could do that. If we wanted $20,000 for the budget worth of patching, this budget is not going to cover that. So the maintenance plan that we have in place right now to keep things going is appropriate. MCOR is a big part of that. When something breaks, we fix it. And we do that without going to Board of Finance or CIP. This is the budget that does it.
Yeah.
I think it's worth noting though, Phil, that the risk there is that we are making an assumption that what is in the CIP budget will be approved by the Board of Finance, that there are some pieces that we have in there for maintenance that are large amounts, that's the town's decision whether or not they're going to invest in large capital improvements and maintenance Correct. Issues. So if they were not to do that, then we could not say that things were maintained to the point that we would like them to be if the town chose not to do so. So some of this is outside our control.
Right. CIP items have been changed, and a lot of those items have been extended out a year or two. So they're not going to be in a position to have that money available for next year.
Right, and they're looking at, and when I presented our plan, you had 3 items that we had in year 1, 2 $20,000 plumbing amounts for $20,000 for each building. To me, that's probably the most important, and Tracy kind of hit the nail on the head about your $5,000 that you get put to each school. One project at Hall School is going to be closing in on $5,000, a boys' bathroom where they had to break open the wall. And so that $20,000 will go, we'll start prioritizing those projects for what needs to be fixed from those professionals. And then the other project that you had in there was the accessibility ramp at Hall School for $90,000. And I'll tell you that I clearly told CIP that I think we should wait on that. And the reason why is because Public Works, saw the price. They said, let us come in with and work with Steve Foligno at Hall School and see if we can get the proper materials, a proper, concrete saw, cut out a section and repair it. And it is holding amazingly great. So we're, it's buying us some time, not forever. It's buying us some time. It's so, and Herb, I'll answer your book question. I am going to collect some data. But I'll tell you that in the current budget, what we're in right now, I can absolutely foresee that we'll be able to buy books in our current budget. And if you want me to spend $10,000 in books, we could easily do that. So in the current budget without increasing or adjusting the 23-24 budget, and we could do it safely.
Okay.
So Phil, it might be useful though, if you do see that there's some additional increase, if you want to give us some options so that you can do the pre-calculations before we get there. So we're not saying, well, how about you increase it by 4,500? Well, no, what would it be if you increased it by 5,000? Come back with a couple of pre-calculated options on the library. Okay. Donna, I see your hand, but I want to make sure that if there's anybody else who's got a comment. Okay, sorry, I have to look at all the different screens. Go ahead, Donna.
That's okay. So Phil, in a lot of the presentations about the new or reconfigured school, one of the things you showed was like desks with wheels so that things could change. Is there a reason we couldn't start doing something like that now if it's going to help the kids learn better and make it, if the current classroom and the whatever the new classroom would be are similar in size, so you don't have to worry about furniture being too big or too small, but would it be prudent to at least put it on our list if there is money left over at the end of this year to consider, if that's going to help the kids learn better, why should we wait for something like desks?
It's on our list already. So is library furniture in the past, and that's why we purchased the library furniture. Same concept. So I'm literally, and Mary Kay gave me this catalog the other day, and there's the furniture right there. So I mean, we keep our list intentionally, and it's not a shopping list. I tell the administrators from day one of a budget year, if it's not in the budget, keep the list of things that if we needed more of, what would we purchase? And it's got to be meaningful and impactful for instruction and learning. And so we just keep that list. Books is always on it. Furniture is one of those things that we've talked about that's on it. So it is not cheap, Donna, I will tell you. And you don't get the downfall of it is it's built into a project, and there's no reimbursement rate on it if you buy it yourself.
I'm just thinking that for me, it's most important that our kids learn and learn well.
Yep.
So, if you came back to me and said it's going to be $500,000 for 20 desks, my tune would change quickly.
Not quite that high.
Expensive, but not that expensive.
But it's just, if there's things that the new facility or a reconfigured facility would give our students that we could give them sooner and just take it to the new place. Right. If it's going to help, if it's that important to help them learn, then I think we should really consider it. And I'd like maybe in our May meeting, if you could give us a list of the narrowed down wish list, so we can think about it and ask more questions, so that by the time this budget year is over, and you start asking us questions, that we have given it the appropriate amount of thought.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's typically what we'll do too, is we'll prioritize that list and go through and go, well, that's a nice, but it's not something that is, long-term makes sense. The security camera increase, I already know, and Mary Kay is going to have a big smile when I say this. I already know that she's going to ask for additional security cameras at the end of this year for her building for certain spots. They've got new security cameras in that building. But they could probably use, 5 or 6 more for certain spots that they've discovered would be very, very helpful. And so, those are things that we prioritize when I give you the list, like I did last year. Cybersecurity work, we've done the list for teacher laptops, things like that. If we can keep those things out of the budget and use savings for it, that's always how I prioritize. But I'm glad to share that list with you and show you kind of how we've processed through and what's on that list, and the reason we're choosing the way we're choosing.
And last year you did that at the May meeting as well, to give you time if you were going to make those purchases to do so. So if you would just stick a pin in that for the May meeting, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Okay. Did I see somebody else's hand? Okay. Okay. So I believe, unless there are any additional questions or additions or changes or calculations you want Phil to make in advance of our regular meeting for next week, I think we are, hang on, let me jump to my correct screen here so that I'm looking at the agenda and not just.
Hey, Michelle, just for clarity, 150,000 for non-lapsing is what you're asking me to apply.
Yes.
And can I ask that we leave the books out of it, so we're not messing with $4,500, and I can just do that this year out of 22-23, and then we're not adjusting 23-24?
I think that makes sense.
Is that okay with everybody?
Anybody have any strong oppositions to that, to spending it in June instead of July?
That works for me.
Okay. Okay. There was agreement on that. Okay, so that was item 7, program adjustments. Donna, was there anything else? We said we were going to stick a pin in this. Was there anything else that you wanted to discuss? Did that cover all of your concerns that we were, doing right before we adjourn?
Let me just double check real quickly. I think we've spoken about them.
Yeah. Because we do have other business to attend to at our regular meeting.
Yeah, I think that covered it. Okay. If I think of anything else, I'll email.
So Michelle, I'm sorry, I'm just assuming now, based upon, it sounds like people are relatively happy that no 6 o'clock meeting before your regular meeting next meeting, and that with this adjustment, you'll just vote on that change at your regular meeting.
Exactly. Okay, so our regular meeting will then start at 7. And what's the exact date? Is that the 14th? Are we doing a Valentine's Day together? Because you all love education so much. We're going to be each other's Valentines and have our meeting at 7 o'clock on the 14th. And that'll be the time at which we vote for the budget. Okay, well, thank you all very much for your participation. We look forward to having more members of the public join us for that conversation on the 14th. And otherwise, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Herb. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Laura. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that was unanimous. Okay, thank you all, and have a good evening. Thank you, Phil, and all of the administrators for all of your hard work on this budget. You should be very proud of ourselves.
Thanks. Have a good night, all. 7:16.
Good night.